Hello and welcome to the Writecome.com podcast, where we help you to make money from your words. Each episode will be sharing tips, tricks, and strategies you can use to make more money from your writing, publishing, and marketing to your fans and audience. Let's get started with your host, Barry J. McDonald.
Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to today's podcast episode from Writecome.com. And today's podcast episode is entitled, An Opinion is Just an Opinion. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. What is an opinion? Basically, it's just a collection of words either spoken to you or written in text. And that's all it is. It's just a collection of words. It's somebody's thought on a particular topic. You know, somebody may look at a Ferrari and a Porsche side by side, and they would say the Porsche is better than the Ferrari. Or somebody would look at a footballer like Ronaldo and say, well, Maradona was a better player than him. Or somebody could look at that dress that was on the internet a few months back or a few years back and say, yes, it really was grey or it really was purple. But at the end of the day, that is simply an opinion. That's somebody's thought. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of us, you know, when somebody gives an opinion like that, a thought, we feel that we need to honour it some way. We feel that we need to take it seriously, especially if it is aimed towards us and our work. You know, if somebody leaves a bad book review, well then, again, that is just simply somebody's opinion on your book. They mightn't have liked your book, they mightn't have liked your style of writing, and they may write in the book review, this book is terrible, this writer is terrible, please don't buy this book. Now, for a lot of us, unfortunately, we will look at that book review and we will give that opinion some strength. We will think to ourselves, you know something, that person voiced that opinion and it's so true. I am a poor writer. Or yes, it is a poor book. And then you'll get the same person then maybe, or the same book, and then you might get somebody else who will have a completely different opinion of your book, in that they'll probably say it's probably the best book they have read. It may be a book that made them laugh. It may be a book that, you know, made a difference in their lives, or it's a book they have recommended to friends and family. And it always surprises me when I read through books and I get two conflicting opinions. You get somebody who says that is the most terrible book they've ever read, and then you have people who say this is the best book. And like, both people have simply when you think about it, both people have read the exact same words on the page. You know, it's not as if the book reviewer A got a completely different book from book reviewer B. They have read the exact same words, but they've come away from it in a different way. And unfortunately, sometimes when we see their opinion, especially when they're a negative one, I think it's a survival thing in us, in that we are constantly looking out for negativity. We're constantly looking out for danger. And when we see bad book reviews or bad reviews on, or bad comments on our blog posts or whatever, we take it to heart. We assume that that person is right because it's a negative thing. But at the end of the day, that is just simply an opinion. It's just a collection of words. It's just somebody's thought. And, you know, that opinion mightn't be shared with everybody. So I want you just to keep that in mind today, whatever you are doing. That opinion is just an opinion. It's not a fact about you, in that two people come at your work from different angles and have complete different opinions on it. Now, when I was just thinking about that, when I was just recording this podcast episode this morning, I was just thinking to myself, where does that kind of feeling of worrying about what other people's opinions are like, why do we fear it so much? And I was just thinking back to my childhood, in that a lot of times maybe my parents would, well, especially my mother was more aware of it, or used it more as a kind of way of keeping me in line compared to my father. But she would use the line, what would the neighbours say? What would the neighbours say if they saw you running around in those clothes? What would the neighbours say if they seen you throwing stones at cars? Or what would the neighbours say if this or that? And she almost used that as a kind of threat, in that I constantly had to be aware because everybody was watching me, and it was more important for me to keep everybody happy than myself, because they had more importance in my life. And she used that many, many times when I was growing up, and that's probably one of the things that, you know, probably kept me away from writing for the longest time, or just putting myself out there, was I was constantly fearing, what would other people say? What would the neighbours think? What would the friends think of my book? What would, you know, friends who come upon this podcast, what would they think about it? What about people I'd gone to school with? What opinions would they have of my work? And unfortunately, a lot of us hold ourselves back because of the general public, or the threat of the neighbours and all those different things. And it's funny, when we come into this life, we didn't have a care in the world about what other people thought. You know, if you wanted to whip off your nappy, and if you wanted to run across the front room in the nude, you never give it any thought at all. You just whipped it off and you ran through, and you probably laughed and giggled your way across the room, but you never gave much opinion into what people thought, whether you were a nappy or not. And it was only as you got older you started probably becoming more aware. Again, it could be maybe programming by your parents. It could be just listening to the gossip of other people. You know, sometimes I used to hear people talking about somebody else that maybe I didn't even know about. I'd be sitting in maybe on the edge of a conversation and hearing two grown-ups talking and say, oh, did you hear about such and such a person? You know, such and such a thing happened. Oh, his poor family. What is poor family going to think? His poor family, his poor family. And if those people really cared about his poor family, they wouldn't have been gossiping about it. But I think as well too, that kind of put that into me, that you constantly had to be aware, because there were eyes and ears on you, and if you stepped out of line, other people would pick up on it and it would bring shame upon your family. Now, I don't think it's as bad over here in the West compared to the East. You know, some of the Oriental families and Asian families have a strong belief that, you know, you need to stay in line and you need to follow the family traditions, because you need to keep the family's name right. You can't bring any shame on the family. But when you think about it, you know, shame is just caring about what other people's opinions of you. And should you really care about other people's opinions? Because sometimes people are going to make an opinion up about you, even if they've never met you, even if they, you know, never read your content. Sometimes people will base opinion on maybe a friend who said, oh, that person is somebody you should stay away from. And because of that, then you stay away from them. And it's funny, the other day I was just talking to my son, who sometimes is a little bit more pessimistic than myself, and I was just talking about Ross Edgley. Now, Ross is somebody who does all these crazy challenges, like he swam all the way around Britain, and he did a triathlon one time where he was carrying a tree on his back. Now, I said to my son, isn't that amazing that somebody could actually put a tree on their back and try and cycle and swim and do a marathon with it? And my first response from my son, who absolutely nothing about Ross Edgley, he just said to me, prick. And that was his opinion of them. He'd never seen Ross Edgley on social media. He wouldn't even know him in a picture. He'd never read any of his content. But that was his opinion on them just from that story. And as I said, you know, people are going to have opinion on you, whether you like it or not. So if they are going to have opinions on you, whether they are right or wrong, should you really care about what they think about you? Should you really care what they think about your book? Should they really care about, you know, the content you're putting out today? Or should you, you know, you've got fear today because you're holding yourself back, because you're afraid you're going to draw attention to yourself, that you're going to draw negative reviews to your book, or you're going to get bad comments in your blog post, or somebody's going to slate you in your podcast, whatever. Should you really care about those people? You know, because at the end of the day, you know, an opinion is just an opinion. It's just a collection of words. It's some thought that somebody had, but it's not a fact, and it's not something that kind of sums you up. You know, whatever bad book review you might have had today, that's basically just aimed at the book. Now, some people may take a pop at you and say that you're a weak writer and you're this or you're that, but that doesn't sum you up at all, because somebody, as I said, could come to your book and have a completely different opinion of your work. So which one is right? Should you go with the negative one, or should you go with the positive one? So as always, if you'd like to reach out to me, you can certainly send an email to barryjmcdonald@gmail.com. And I'm getting a little bit active over on Twitter, so if you want to go over to Twitter, if you want to reach out, if you do a search for Come Write, I couldn't get Right Come, that was the closest I could get to it. So if you do a search for Come Write, COMEWRITE, you'll find me on Twitter. And as always, if you'd like to find out more what I do over on the Right Come site, if you are interested in writing, self-publishing or whatever, or anything like that, if you want to head over there right now, I have got 9 great free reports on the homepage if you want to collect a few of them, and I'm sure it will help you out. And as always, if you'd like to reach out to me, certainly reach out, or if you'd like to share this podcast episode with other people, I would greatly appreciate it. So as always, thanks for sharing your time again today, and stop listening to those opinions. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like more from the rightcome.com podcast, be sure to subscribe now for more tips, tricks, and ideas you can use to make more money from your words. See you in the next episode.